Shabbat Shalom, Baruch Haba, welcome. Hatzoraim Tovim, good afternoon. This is our Judaism 101 class, our Shabbat afternoon class, in which we're studying the tenets of Judaism. And we're doing this by means of the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Lussaro's book, Derech Hashem, The Way of God. And so we're studying what it is to be created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim. We're in chapter 2 of The Way of God, called The Purpose of Creation. We're in section 2, which says, God's wisdom, however decreed, that for such good to be perfect, the one enjoying it must be its master. He must be one who has earned it for himself, and not one associated with it accidentally, without reason. In a way, this can be said to partially resemble God's own perfection, at least to the degree that this is possible. God is perfect because of his intrinsic nature, and not without cause. His true essence makes perfection imperative and precludes any fault. No other being, however, can have such a quality where its essential nature requires its perfection and precludes all deficiency. In order to resemble God to some degree, it is at least necessary that this creature earn the perfection that its essence does not require, and avoid deficiency that its nature does not preclude. And so where we are is in exactly that point. That's where we stopped last week. In order to resemble God to some degree, it is at least necessary that this creature earn its perfection, the perfection that its essence does not require. So where we ended up last week is that in Christianity this becomes very problematic, particularly in evangelical Christianity. This becomes very problematic because of the term earned perfection. And we've been raised in the evangelical community. Those who have had any dealings with the evangelical community know that what is stressed over and over and over and over again is salvation by grace through faith. Ephesians 2, 8 and 9. And we say, yes, we do not disagree with that at all. We're not talking what is called soteriology. We're not talking salvation issues here. We're talking living issues here. That we are saved by grace through faith. Judaism agrees with this. This is not in dispute in Judaism. A person, none of us is deserving of God's goodness. The conduit is broken. Well, we discussed a few weeks ago. The conduit's broken. And we're the ones who broke the conduit. So we don't deserve to receive the blessing of God. We do not deserve to receive the pouring out of God's blessing. So this is the grace. Grace is that we don't deserve it. Chesed, the mercy, the kindness, is that we should receive the opposite of that. And yet God is good and kind and merciful, so that rather than receiving the opposite of it, that is judgment, justice, these kinds of things that he gives to us. He shows us mercy, and he brings about forgiveness for us. That we should earn it. What does this mean? That we should earn perfection. Well, this is not something that is just, in Christianity we would say just Old Testament. And Old Testament is not a good term. It is the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Because we say the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, is actually not a New Testament. It is renewing the covenant, that he will renew the covenant. And rather than, it's not that the covenant itself is new, it is that the action of it is new, that the formation of it, the way that it is formed is new. That is, that he said, I will put a new covenant, I will renew my covenant with you. That the other covenant was written on tablets of stone, but this covenant shall be written on the tablets of your heart. And so basically it's the same covenant, it's just written in a different place. Rather than being written on the tablets of stone, it's written upon our heart. So in saying that, it is an issue of the Brit Chadashah that we are told to be careful of. Kefa puts it this way, that we are to ascertain, we're to make certain of our salvation.
Peter.
Kefa, Peter, yes. So we're to make certain of our salvation. Paul says that we're to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. That kind of goes in line with what we were discussing this morning in the morning service concerning having the proper respect for God. Where in the bracha achava rabbah, the blessing achava, the great love achava rabbah, and Baruch Shabbat. Let's see. It's around here somewhere. The reason why I do this is to give you the Hebrew, because it's important. Achava rabbah, abundant love, the great love. The second portion of it says, enlighten our eyes in your Torah, attach our hearts to your commandment. Now this part here, unify levavenu, to our hearts, le'achava, to love, ul yira, and to fear, et shmecha, your name. That we are to have a fearfulness concerning God. That we're to have a proper respect to Him. That we're to have a proper reverence for Him. So this business of approaching God any way you please and doing however you want, and everybody's doing their own thing. I come to God my way, you go to God your way, whatever, all of these kinds of things. No, that's forbidden. It's not acceptable. There's a proper and appropriate way in which for us to approach God. And the reason why, it's the same, I used the analogy this morning, I've used it several times. It's like going to the White House. You can't just walk into the White House and visit the president. There's protocol. There's dress code. There's all kinds of things, procedures that one must go through in order to have a visitation with the president, to visit the president for any length of time. I have a brother who was invited to the White House a couple of years ago to see the president. He works at a school district here nearby, and because of the work that he has done with certain aspects of the society in his area, in his district, doing very special things and what have you. So he was invited to go and have a conference with the president on how to do this across the United States and such. And in doing so, they said to him what the protocols were for visiting the president, for seeing the president. They told him what the dress code was. He had to wear a suit, tie, certain, the shoes, make sure that you're well trimmed and all of that. But there was a dress code and there's protocol. The president will do this. You will do this. The president will will extend his hand. What have you? And so you have to follow the protocol. If you went up there all slovenly, in a beach surfer's outfit or whatever, muscle shirt and sandals and whatever, do you suppose he would have gotten in? He would not have even gotten in the gate, much less gotten into the Oval Office or any of these kinds of things, the Rose Garden. and so it is. We need to have a proper respect and deference, a proper reverence for the King of Kings. So understanding that. And so this is why Rav Shalom says to work out in fear and trembling, to work out our salvation. In other words, have a proper perspective of what's going on, knowing who we are and what we are and all of these kinds of things. So, saying all of this to say, no other being can have such a quality where its essential nature requires its perfection and precludes all deficiency. In order to resemble God to some degree, it is at least necessary that this creature earn the perfection. There's no other creature who can approach God. This is an awesome thing to contemplate. Of all the millions of species of life that there are on this planet, only man approaches God. Only man. There are animals on this planet that are very human-like in their appearance, in their action, in their just about every way.
You talk about the gorillas, chimpanzees.
Yeah. They're very humanistic.
Yeah.
But they cannot approach God. They do not have the ability. The distinction is this, that as close to resembling human beings as they are, they do not have the nefesh chashamayim. They have the nefesh bechama, they have the animal instinct, but they do not have the spiritual instinct. The angelic realm, the heavenly realm, is the opposite. They have the nefesh shemayim. They have the spiritual instinct, but they do not have the nefesh bechama. They do not have the earthly instinct, the worldly instinct, the animal instinct. Mankind has both.
Yeah, amen.
We are attached to this earth, and we are attached to Him. So man is the moderator between the two. Huh?
I have a question.
Yes.
I guess more of a statement, but it's probably a question too. I think that in God showing us back to your fear and trembling, I'm just wondering if that role model type of thing was back in Mount Sinai, where everybody was trembling and had so much fear when God was about to, that mountain.
Absolutely.
And He had to bathe them. Everybody had to be bathed and things.
They had to mikvah. They had to make a mikvah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So He's kind of showing
To prepare. Yes, they had to bathe. They had to make a mikvah. They had to change their clothes. They had to put on their best clothes, their good clothes, their new clothes. Yes, protocol, because this the king's coming down onto the mountain before them, and I say this frequently. I shared it with the class this morning. I will say it again with you, and you're going to hear this more and more from me as we get into these teachings, because they all seem to be coalescing together in a single direction. This is a real kingdom, and He is a real king. Think about this. This is a real kingdom. When Yeshua is talking about the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom, Malchut Cheshamayim, or Malchut Chayeluhim, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, is like this, is like this, is like this, is like this. This is a real kingdom to which He speaks. And in actuality, it is the kingdom. All the others are pretenders. All other kingdoms are lower kingdoms, are lower levels. Yet we give the deference, we give the preference, we give the reverence to the lower kingdoms, and we act as though the highest kingdom does not exist at all. Or if it exists, it's out there in ethereal, it's out there in the mist somewhere. When in fact, it's the real kingdom. And He's the king. This falls in line with the Ten Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, where we are warned about taking for ourselves other gods who are lesser gods than He is God. Yet the people, Nachmanides speaks to this, that there were 3 levels of idolatry that took place, which was being warned against here. We won't get into all of that, but just that one of the levels of idolatry were these lesser beings, i.e. Malachim, the angels. And this is whom the first idolaters began to worship, began to serve. So we're talking the days before the flood. What got them into trouble was that they were, rather than worshiping God himself, they were worshiping lesser entities than God. That is, that they were worshiping angels, who are themselves created beings. Granted that they are superfluously more powerful than we are, that they are tremendously in their thoughts and their actions, their abilities, their capabilities, all of these things, that they have wisdom and understanding far beyond our ability in this tabernacle. That their power is magical to us, is mysterious, is miraculous to us. Yet they are not God. They themselves are limited in what they can do and how far they can go.
What are the other two? Or what I was thinking of that.
So the other two, which, yes, I'll share that with you. The other two, that after the flood, that they began to worship men. So you take even a step down. First they're worshiping angels, now they're worshiping men. And so we have the worship of Nimrod, the first king of Babel, the beginning of the Babylonian Empire. The Tower of Babel was built by Nimrod. And so you have with Babel, you have the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, whom they treat as being a god, being a deity. And from that time, from that point, all the way to where? To Rome. The Caesarim, the Caesars. Who what? Julius Caesar was proclaimed to be a god. Augustus Caesar, a god. And the Caesars after, until Constantine, they all saw themselves as being deity, as being divine. And they were worshipped. Now, I spoke to this a few weeks ago on the Shabbat morning service, that this is where the term of wishing upon a star comes from. And that's where it was. It was about 3 weeks ago, I guess, when I was teaching on that, wishing upon a star. What we were discussing earlier. Every star has its angel, and every angel has its star. And the whole idea of wishing upon the star is a pagan idea. Because basically to wish upon a star is to place your hopes upon this star, i.e. upon this angel, rather than upon God himself. In other words, they're praying to the star.
That's why he says don't worship angels.
Correct. And don't worship stars.
Yeah.
You're not to worship the planets. You're not to bow down to the planets.
We can study them and understand them. And,
sure. They're given to us for signs and seasons.
Yeah.
But they have their purpose, and they're not deity. They're not divine. But they're treated as though they are divine. The old cowboy term of hitching your wagon to a star. It all comes from this.
But like TV star? Movie star?
The reason was because it was believed, as we shared with you, that every angel has its star, every star has its angel. So the king, also because the king was now looked upon as being deity, i.e. angelic, i.e. what have you, so it was seen that the king had his star.
Oh, wow.
So as the king was rising in his power and such, the people would attach themselves to his star, i.e. they would worship his star, they would pray to his star, those kinds of things.
It's also how the Greeks believed you became part of the constellation.
Yes, and so what? The constellations are named after what? Gods and goddesses. This is why. Okay, so how in the world did I get up on that tangent? Anyway.
It was a good one, though.
So, we were talking about idolatry, and talking about the lower, going down the levels. Okay, so you have, first they're worshiping angels, then they're worshiping man. Next comes the third one, according to Nachmanides, the next level then becomes demons. And the wonder of the worship of demons by Nachmanides is that they have no power or authority at all. They are the lowest level. And so the wonder is that they are a lower level than man. So that the wonder is that man would worship them at all.
They only have the power you give them.
They have the power you give them.
So the fallen angels
The
aren't...
demons are not fallen angels.
But they're not the... I thought that demons were the offspring.
Demons are not, no. Demons are entities of their own. In
So
fact,
when
according...
Jesus was throwing them out...
Yes,
then where
according
did they
to
come
Judaism, where demons actually come from are human curses.
That would make sense.
As in, you breathe out a curse, you curse someone, you breathe out a curse, your breath, how do you say breath in Hebrew? Ruach.
Yes.
How do you say spirit in Hebrew? Ruach. You say breath and spirit are the same thing. So as you're breathing out a curse, you're sending out a spirit. And Judaism teaches that this is actually where demons come from.
If you're doing the curses in the Old Testament, it says, curse if you do this, will you then allow...
This is as though he does something bad to me, so I curse him.
Oh, so you physically have to say a curse.
So
okay, so it's not about...
somebody does something bad, or I don't like you, so I curse you. In doing this, I'm sending out evil, vibes,
Okay.
to put it in a hippie culture way.
So if somebody doesn't know us, but is jealous of us or something from us, they can still try to curse us with their demons? Or demons try to come attack us then?
Are you affected?
No,
Why?
because I don't believe. Because I have...
No, they're real. It's real. You should believe in them.
No.
The scripture speaks to them.
We've
So
got a
it's
shield, a
good.
salvation.
You're in the palm of the Father's hand.
Oh, because we're in the blood.
So
We're covered in the blood.
We're covered in the blood.
yeah, you belong to the Father. Nothing
What I
can
meant is I don't believe they have authority, power over me, is what I meant by that.
nothing can happen to you. Not even Chasatan can touch you
Right.
without permission from the Father.
So it's, I guess, because we've had that conversation about, it's, I guess you can call it, it's like a, I guess you can call it like a virus, because it's just there to, I guess, how should I put it? Like we've talked about it before, it's like, because we fill ourselves with God, that demon has no room to get in, right? And like, is that kind of something that you're talking about?
Yeah, more or less. That no being, no entity can touch you without God's permission. We say God's permission literally without it being the will of God. Okay.
So they have no authority over us.
Correct.
If we're full with the Lord, is that what I think you're trying to say?
Yeah.
He has no authority over him.
Unless God gives him authority.
Right,
over
like he did in Job.
Yes.
So Job was righteous, and
Correct.
he still allowed it.
Correct.
Was that to test the motive of the heart? I think we used to teach you that.
It was to literally to put Chasatan in his place. Chasatan was accusing, and God was going to demonstrate to prove to Chasatan. So it's not even that you're just proving to other human beings, to yourself or to other human beings. You're actually a witness, a testimony to the spiritual realm, to the heavenly realm.
Oh, amen. I like that.
They're seeing you. The angels are watching you. But the New Testament says that they marvel at us, that they desire to peer into these things, to look into these things, because remember that though they are similar with us, with the nefesh shemayim, with the spiritual instinct, they don't have the nefesh bekamah, so they don't understand us.
Oh, wow. That makes sense, though.
Okay, the same is true, and they do not understand the animal world per se. The same is true with the nefesh bekamah, with the creatures that have the animal instinct. They do not understand the spiritual because they don't have it. It's not there for them. So, anyway.
I love that. Thank you.
So saying all of that, you're welcome. Saying all of that to say that we are to work out our salvation in fear and trembling. So if we would go to Reshit chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1, in the creation of Adam, the creation of man, verse 26. ויאמר אלוהים נעשה אדם בצלמנו כדמותנו. So בצלמנו, in our image. כדמותנו, after our likeness. Let us make man in our image. By the way, and it's important here to distinguish, because it doesn't say let us create man. It says let us make man. Create means is bara. And here he does not say bara, he says Omer Elohim Na'aseh, from where we get the term Oseh, Asa, Oseh Shalom Bimroma. You know the song, right? Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu. Okay, so Oseh Shalom. So, Na'aseh, to make. Why? What's the difference here? What's the distinction here? Between bara and asa. The distinction. Asa, to make. What do you make things with?
Your hands.
Your hands. Bara, to create. What do you create with? What does God create with? His voice. So all the rest of creation is spoken into existence. That he simply speaks it and it is. But God does not speak Adam into existence. Thus asa, to make. He used his hands. So we read in chapter 2, in the story of creation of chapter 2, that he fashioned man, he forms man from the dust of the earth. Saying what? There's an active involvement, intricate involvement, a physical, if you would, involvement in the creation of man that is different from all the rest of creation.
How do I spell the Hebrew word create?
Bara, B-A-R-A.
Okay. And then asa is a...
A-S-A.
That is so cool, like a potter.
So, yes. So, then he says, Bet salmenu, bet salmenu, in salam. So this is translated in, so let me break it down for you. Bet, as it comes before the word here, is a prefix that means in. At the end there's a nu, nun vav, nu, which as a suffix means our. And then the root word is salam. So everyone say salam. T-Z-A-L-A-M. Salam. Salam means shadow. Here translated image. Because when I look down, the light is shining on me and I look down, it is an image of me on the ground. all darkened, albeit, correct? No distinction of face or characteristics of anything, but it is the express image of me. I.e. what? It looks like me. When I move, it moves. When I stop moving, it stops moving. Where I go, it goes. Where I stay, it stays. Everything about me that's going on within me is going on with my shadow. So put your hand out like this out over the ground. Go ahead and do it. And see your shadow. Notice that your shadow is doing whatever you do. It has the resemblance of your hand, your arm, your leg, what have you. That's why here. But salam, the word shadow.
So we are a shadow of him.
We are a shadow of him. We are in his express image, in his likeness.
Is that what Jesus says, if you see me, you see the Father?
Correct. He comes in the express likeness of the Father.
And when it talks about the shadow of the Almighty.
So, go ahead.
Well, that's where we're supposed to stay to keep in God's graces.
Yes.
The shadow.
So what does this mean in the shadow? What does this mean?
To be like him.
How like him? Exactly like him. As close to a resemblance of him as we possibly can be.
Is that why Jesus came, to show us the role model?
So I'll get there in just a second,
Okay.
but let's go back to what Ramchal says here. Listen to what he says. No other being, oh, that's why I was going through all of that. No other being can have such a quality. Remember we were talking about that? Of all of creation, of all of the beings on this planet, we're the only ones that can do this. In order to resemble God. Remember the word salah. Meaning what? Shadow, resemblance. We are created in the resemblance of God. In order to resemble God to some degree. Alright, so hold your hand out again, look at your shadow. So let me ask you a question. Is it an exact resemblance of your hand?
Yes.
The outline.
Well, the outline, yeah.
But if you move the shadow around and what have you, what kind of light it's in, all these kind of things, it does not have the texture, the complexity, the color, all of these different things. You look at your hand and you can see all the lifelines and all that kind of wrinkles and stuff like
It's
that.
not
There,
a perfect picture, it's
correct.
a shadow.
It is a shadow, it is a semblance.
Okay.
Okay? In order to resemble God to some degree, it is at least necessary that this creature earn the perfection. You have to work for it. Saying what? This is not a Cinderella story. This is not a story where we have some fairy godmother who waves her magic wand and poof, we become something. We have to work for it.
Continues.
I don't have to work to become a child of God, but I have to work to resemble my Father. There are those children of kings, of royalty, who act nothing like their father, nothing like their mother. They act nothing like the king and the queen. All you have to do is look at the last 70, 80 years of British royalty. And the embarrassment that some of those people were to the kings and to the queens, to the monarchy.
So when we keep his commandments and we do our mitzvahs and stuff like that, that's staying in a position?
That
is that the word that you mean?
In essence, that what is the keeping of Torah? Torah is the instruction of God. This is how to be holy. As he said, I, the Lord your God, am holy, so you be holy. So we're to be like him, as close like him, as close to him in our appearance, in who we are, what we are, as we possibly can be. And this is what the Ramchal is speaking to. In order to resemble God. In order for me to have the appearance, not that I am God, but to have this tzala, this shadow of God. I must earn what is not required of me. What does it mean? I must earn what is not required of me. I have choices. I have a choice to make. So I can choose to do or not to do. I can choose to be or not to be. I can choose to say or not to say. I can choose to watch, not to watch. To think, not to think. To see, not to see. To go, not to go. God does not force me to keep the Torah. I choose to or not to. So, because of this, I have a job for me. I have work to do. There's work in front of me. And in fact, every moment that I'm awake, there's work in front of me. I am constantly making choices, assessing the situation. So are you. You are constantly assessing the situation. You're sitting there, you're flipping through the channels on your TV. You're deciding, is this appropriate, is this inappropriate? Is this right or not right? You watch it for a little bit, you say, I don't want to watch this is inappropriate for me. Why are you doing that? Because you see you're working it out. You have a choice here, good or evil. Choose you this day whom you will serve. That's what Joshua says. Choose you this day whom you will serve. God says to Bnei Israel, to the children of Israel, He says, I have set before you blessing and cursing. I have set before you life and death. Choose life and you shall live. This is what is being spoken to here. To choose it out. Work it out. I spoke this morning concerning the fact that in our society today, very seldom do we think about the consequences of our moment-to-moment actions and decisions. We don't think about it.
For daily habit type things.
Not only that, but just that he's rubbing his mustache this way. It's just, he's not even thinking about it. Not aware that he's doing it. It's just something that's being done. Okay? We are not aware of these things. We're not aware of the consequences of what we do. Because you see, before he came in, he sneezed. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So now he's grooming himself. I'm just using you as an example. What? He saw me. He's a prophet. All right.
You really like him.
He sneezes. So before he comes in, he sneezes. Now he's doing this, right? And the mucus has been on his mustache here. And it's not noticeable, but there are germs there from the sneeze.
Then he touches the table.
He's touching the table. He shakes your hand.
You're just like a germ.
Do you know why? Do you know why people get sick? By the way, I'm not sick. I have a polyp in my nasal, so that's why I sound like I have a cold. Okay? But so when a person gets sick, you know why you get sick? You get sick because somebody else's mucus has been made contact with your hand, and that mucus
flying around in the air.
So what I'm saying is that we're not even conscious.
That's such a good example, though.
Of things that we're doing, just everyday, ordinary things, and the consequences that it has on me and on the people around us, much less the more important things of life. Like thoughts running uncontrolled in my brain, desires running uncontrolled in my heart, these kinds of things. So
do you think that if we become more resembling of the Father, we become more aware of all the actions.
Very
and
much
reactions,
more aware. Yes.
of cause and the effects. So to
Yes.
speak.
Exactly this. Exactly
So
this.
heightened awareness.
That everything that I do, everything that I say has impact on both the physical realm and the spiritual realm.
So back to, if you curse somebody, it's like sitting in this room, you sense it out, is that what you're saying?
The rabbis put it this way: as it is done on earth, so it is done in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeshua put it this way:
What is
as it is in heaven, so may it be on earth. Our
Okay.
Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There is this constant intermingling of the realms.
Wow, that's so good. That's great. That's so awesome.
So what is happening there is affecting here. What is happening here is affecting there. All right, so let's do this. Running out of time. Let's do this. Go to Philippians chapter 2. We will be going here a lot in all of our classes, because as I said, all of these points are coming together at the same time, which to me is a very cool thing. So Philippians chapter 2. You're very familiar with verse 5 and on. Have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Messiah, Yeshua, who though existing in the form of God, did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking on the form of a slave, becoming the likeness of man. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself, became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this reason God highly exalted him. This is the part that is most often quoted. God has highly exalted him and given him a name that is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue profess that Yeshua is Messiah, that Yeshua Messiah is the Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now, what we have here is exactly the means of B'Tselem Elohim, to be in the image of God. Is Yeshua in the image of God? Not a trick question. Is Yeshua in the image of God? Yes. Yes, he is. He is the express likeness, the scripture says. Here he says, though existing in the form of God. Is he God? Yes. Did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped. Don't trip there. It simply says he didn't make a big issue about it in front of humanity.
Oh.
He didn't walk around saying, I'm God, listen to me.
Like some people.
All of the evidence was in his word and in his actions. He calmed the storm, for heaven's sake. He fed 5,000 with 2 fishes and a loaf of bread. He raised Lazar from the dead. He raised himself from the dead.
Turn Mayim to Lachaim.
He turned Mayim to L'chaim.
This, when we just doing Philippians 2:12 says exactly salvation with fear and trembling. It says, in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear.
Yes,
and
that's the
trembling.
one verse I was quoting to.
That's so awesome.
So, don't trip here where it says, did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped. In other words, what? He wasn't pushing, he wasn't throwing it in everybody's face. Why? Because he lived in humility. He lived as a chassid, a Hasidic Jew, whose rules are this: righteousness, humility, and joy. The chassid. That's called Hasidut. The rules of Hasidut: righteousness, humility, and joy. Now look at verse 7. Very carefully. But he did what?
Make himself no reputation.
who though existing in the form of God, this is verse 6, who though existing in the form of God did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped, verse 7, but he emptied himself. Do you see that? Are you with me? Verse 7. He emptied himself. Why? Why did he empty himself? This has everything to do with the relationship between a rabbi and his student, a rabbi and a talmid. I've spoken to this very frequently. That the talmid becomes like his rabbi. How does he become like his rabbi? He stops being himself. He takes on the identity of his rabbi. Why? Because he's with his rabbi 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 4 weeks out of a month, 12 months out of the year, day in and day out. Every day, all day, every day, he's with his rabbi. When the rabbi gets up in the morning, the talmid gets up with him. When the rabbi goes to sleep at night, the talmid goes to sleep with him. They get up at the same time, they go to bed at the same time. When the rabbi eats breakfast, the talmid eats breakfast. When he eats lunch, the talmid eats lunch. When he eats supper, the talmid eats supper. When the rabbi goes out, he goes out. When he comes in, he comes in. When the rabbi goes to town, he goes to town. When he goes out on ministry, he goes out on... So whatever the rabbi is doing, there's the talmid at his side all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You see that in the Talmidim of Yeshua. You see this in the disciples of Yeshua. Everywhere he is, they are there. Everything he's doing, they're involved in it. They're there listening to him, watching him, studying him, all of these things. Why? Because he is becoming ingrained in them. Do you wonder how they could remember all of these things to write about later?
Yeah.
Because it was ingrained in them. So that when you're with a person like this, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years and years, when you are with a person like this, you begin to say the things they say. You begin to talk like them, to act like them, to walk like them, to dress like them, to do like them, to be like them. Why? Because their life is infused into you.
Yeah.
So, how many times did I say growing up, I will never say that to my children. What my parents said to me, what my dad said to me. I'll never be like that with my children. I'll never say that to my children. And then when I had children, what? I found that I became my father. In actions, in words, in deeds, in thought, I became my father. Why is that? Well, because I lived 18 years with the man. He was there day and night. We ate together. When he went to bed, we all went to bed. When he woke up, we all woke up.
He was a ruler.
Yes, very much so. But he was also instructor. But when you're with someone, this is why we need to be careful with whom we hang out.
Amen.
Because you begin to take on their attributes.
I like it when you say that when one of the disciples would ask a question of another rabbi, you always say, go ask your rabbi.
You go ask your rabbi, exactly.
Very important for us to realize that.
Yes, the rabbis say, number one, get yourself a rabbi. And number two, if you have a question, ask your rabbi. Why? Because he has a certain custom, a certain way of doing things that was taught to him by his rabbis, and you need to follow that chain. If you're going to come to me to ask me a question, that means you're my talmid, you're my student. Therefore, you do what I'm instructing you to do.
And that's because we're under your umbrella, and we are your sheep in a way.
Yes,
and you protect us.
You come under my authority. If you come here, you're coming under my authority.
Yes.
Okay. This is very different from the evangelical church where you just come and I don't have to do what you say or whatever, all these kinds of things. No, the whole purpose of coming here is I'm giving you instruction on how to live life. And you best do it. And the truth is that most people who don't, they're not going to be comfortable here. Not that I go around with my stick. Some rabbis did, okay? Some other rabbis did have their stick, for real. And they beat the Talmud. If the Talmud misbehaved, they would use the stick. By the way, did you know that the Talmud also called his rabbi by another name, by another term, called Av? And that the Rabbi called the Talmud, or the Talmud called the Rav, the rabbi, Av, and that the rabbi called the Talmud Bain?
What was the?
Abba,
Oh, okay.
father, and Bain, son. So you have Rav Shaul speaking concerning Timotheus, concerning Timothy. He calls him Beni. What? My son.
That's how close the relationship
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
This is also where the fulfillment of the prophecy in Isaiah that talks about he will see his offspring comes into play, since Jesus does not have physical
Yeshua did not have offspring, but his disciples were his offspring. This is why when the mother and the brothers come and they say, your mother is here to see you, your brothers are here to see you, and what does he say? These are my mother, these are my brothers, this is my family. Okay, so saying all of that to say this, he emptied himself. What? Okay, so I have no miracles involved here. I have a cup of coffee. Full to the brim, cup of coffee. Now I would like a cup of wine. I have a cup of coffee full to the brim, but I would want a cup of wine. What must I do in order to gain the wine? I cannot pour the wine in if I've got a cup full of coffee, because all the wine will do, perhaps a little bit will go in, but all the wine will do is what? Empty back out again. It will just spill out. And even if I pour for a good while, still yet what? Mostly the coffee will remain and the wine will spill out. In order to have a cup of wine rather than a cup of coffee, what must I do? I must empty out what is in the cup first, then I fill with what I want. If I want to be a follower of Yeshua, if I want God to fill my life, the first thing I must do is empty myself of what is there. I cannot be filled with God as long as there's other stuff that's cluttering the way, that's clogging the pipe.
So you have to die to thyself.
I cannot be filled with God if I've got this life and this world filling my cup. I have to empty the vessel. Okay? That's what it's saying. He did. He's setting the example in front of us. He empties himself of all the cares and the concerns and everything that's in this life. Do you wonder how the Talmudim and how the Shlachim, how the disciples, the apostles, how the followers of Yeshua of that time and that age, how these people were able to do what they did and accomplish what they accomplished? It was this very simply, very basic thing. They emptied themselves of themselves and they filled themselves with Him. So that their life literally was His life. Nothing of myself. Only everything of Him. You see, it says He emptied Himself. Look at what it says next. Taking on the form of a slave. What? Eved. Everyone say Eved.
Eved.
Avodah. Say Avodah. Avodah is the root for Eved. Eved means slave. Then what does Avodah mean? Work. Servitude. What does a slave do? But Avodah is the word that is translated worship. Worship is not, in Judaism, worship is not coming into synagogue or assembly or church and singing songs and doing this and doing that. That's not worship. That's not what the true meaning of it is. The true meaning of avodah is to work as a servant, servitude, to do the work of a servant. Saying what? For a slave, let's think about a slave. For a slave, what period? For what period of time is a slave a slave? 9 to 5?
No.
9 to noon.
24
Whatever the
hours.
master tells you to do.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whatever the master has. Whatever the master sets before him. Full time, every day. So, this is true worship. This is the worship that is acceptable to God. Not the couple of hours that we spend in service, quote unquote, in church or assembly, synagogue, what have you. But rather, from my getting up, from the going up of the sun, from its rising to the setting, as the bracha says. From the rising of the sun to its setting. The entire day, for the whole time that I am awake, I am at his beck and call. As a slave. Remember what I said. This is a real kingdom. Say it. This is a real kingdom. He is a real king.
He's a real king.
And I'm the slave in the kingdom. He's the king. I'm the slave. So what? It says, he emptied himself and took on servitude, became a slave. Verse 8, we're going to close. Verse 8, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death. For whom would you die? And by saying, for whom would you die, I mean willingly. I would die for you. If you would ask me to die for you, I would die for you. To whom would you say that? I would die for you, if you ask me to.
To him.
This is the idea, again, of the monarchy, of the king in the kingdom, and the slave, the servant, who is willing to give his life at the behest, at the request of the king. If the king should request that this night die for him, he would go out and lose his life. Because the king said. No questions asked. No hesitation. He would go. Why? The king said. The king said.
It's like those guys protecting our president. They would take a bullet for him. They would.
It's even more than that. It is deeper than that. It is greater than that. Because the president's not going to ask them.
Oh, it's their job.
To go, no. But I'm saying the president's not going to ask a Secret Service agent. No. He's not going to tell a Secret Service agent, I want you to lose your life for me tomorrow at such and such a
Oh, I see what
time.
you're saying. Okay.
The king can do that.
Oh, wow.
The king, you see, the king can say to his prime minister or to his whatever, you go out and kill yourself tomorrow. You lose your life tomorrow. And the servant says, yes, your highness. Bows before him and walks out and kills himself. This is how obedient these people, the monarchy was, the system of the monarchy. Now, I'm not trying to be gruesome here. God doesn't tell you to go out and commit suicide. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm saying this is the manner of obedience. This is the height of obedience that these people were. It is like the kamikaze pilots of World War II, Japan, such as that. These soldiers who willingly, who voluntarily gave up their lives for the sake of the emperor. They volunteered to do this because they felt it to be a great honor and a great privilege. This is Yeshua right here in front of us. He humbled himself and became obedient to the death, to the point of death. Say what? If God tells me to die, if the Father tells me to die, I will die. And willingly and gladly. You think not gladly? Look at the book of Hebrews chapter 11. Or excuse me, chapter 12. Verse 2, focusing on Yeshua, the initiator and perfecter of our faith, for the joy set before him endured the cross, disregarding the shame. For the joy. Say what? He did it willingly, he did it gladly. He went to the cross. He obeyed his Father. Alright. So, in saying that, he became obedient.
I have a quick question about being a servant versus slave. Like Paul says, I'm a bond.
Here they're the same. The Hebrew is the same word.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
And yes, it's the same word.
Because
A
slave
bond-
is full-time, a servant. Oh.
Only in our mind.
Okay, okay, good.
But in this context, it's the equivalent.
So when he says I'm a bond slave in some text.
To be bonded to him means permanent
he chose,
forever.
And he chose it. He could have, is it a bond servant? You choose to
Yes.
have that. You could have had your freedom.
Yes,
but you choose to
slavery in Judaism is not the slavery of the Civil War era of the United States and that kind of thing. It's not that kind of slavery. Slavery in Judaism is a choice. I sell myself to this person in order that I can pay off my bills or whatever, so I sell myself for a certain amount of time or whatever. The bondservant, it became a permanent relationship.
Okay, that's why he said, okay, good.
All right, so to close, let me put it to you this way. So look at verse 5. Have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Messiah Yeshua. Verse 7, he emptied himself. Let this mind be in you. You have the same mind, the same attitude, the same perspective as Yeshua. Why? He's your rabbi. You're supposed to look like him, act like him, talk like him, believe like him, be like him, all of these things. You're supposed to take on his image so that when they see you, they don't see you, they see him. Okay? You can tell a Chabad person, you can tell a Chabad follower simply by looking at them. You look at a Chabad person and they all dress the same, they all look the same, they all talk the same. So when you go to New York, when you see a Chabad follower, you know that that's a Chabad follower. You can tell a Chassid by the way he dresses, by the way he talks, by the things he says, by whom does he quote? Nachman, Nachman, Nachman. Okay? You can tell a Chassid, you can tell a Chabad, you can tell all of these different sects of Orthodox Judaism by the way they dress, by how they act, by how they talk, by what they do, and that the same is supposed to be true with Yeshua. He's our rabbi. So the way he was, that's the way I'm to be. How he lived, that's the way I'm to live. How he spoke, that's the way I'm to speak. I take on his identity. Thus what? I empty myself, I take on his identity, I become what he was. His life is my life. So that when you see me, you're not seeing me, you're seeing him. That's what it means. Have this attitude in yourself, which was in Yeshua. Have the same mindset. What is it? He emptied himself. Thus, if I'm to follow him, I need to empty myself of myself so that I can be filled with him. If I'm filled with myself, I cannot be filled with him. In fact, every space of my life that is taken by myself, that space is void of him. You see that?
Yeah. Yes. Awesome.
So I must empty myself. Number 2, I must humble myself. Let this mind be in you, which was in Yeshua. He humbled himself. He emptied himself, he humbled himself. Therefore what? I must empty myself, I must humble myself. and become obedient, even to the point of death, would you die for your rabbi? They would die for their rabbi. You remember the great discussion that they had with Kepha. What does Kepha say? Lord, I would die for you. Remember that? And do you remember when he's making his last trip to Jerusalem, his last trip to Jerusalem? And they say, well, he's going to die. Let's go with him. Remember that? Would you die for your rabbi?
If it's Jesus. At that time,
But
they
see,
didn't know.
no, even more than that. That's why I asked the question, for whom would you die?
So if we go into a church, it would be a pastor? Is that our way?
No, get out of the
No.
spirituosity of it.
I know, but I just said that so that we can have that.
No,
I
I'm not saying-
Masses. Because we're recording.
no. To become obedient to death. Okay, so listen to the definition of all of this, because Rav Shaul actually gives the definition before he gives the term. What does it mean to empty yourself, and what does it mean to humble yourself? So, verse 2, same chapter. The definition of these terms is given above. Then make my joy complete by being of the same mind, having the same love, united in spirit with one purpose. Look at verse 3. Do nothing out of selfishness or conceit. What? Empty yourself of all of yourself. Now look at the next part. But with humility. What? Humble yourself. With humility, consider others more important than yourself. Your life is more important than my life. That's to be our perspective. With everybody. Your life is more important than my life. That was the perspective of Yeshua. My life was more important to him than his own life, so that he died. He was willing to die. He did it gladly. He did it joyfully. You see, that's the perspective of the slave to the king. Remember what I said? If the king tells the slave,
Right.
you're to die at such and such a time tomorrow, what does the slave say? Why? Because the life of the king is more important than the life of the slave. And so what the king says, the slave does. To whatever degree possible. To every extent that is possible for him to do, he does it. To the best of his ability, he does it. All the way, completely. And if he doesn't do so, he's embarrassed and ashamed. Now, once again, not telling you that we're not teaching suicide here. That's not the point. But say, using them as an example, when the Japanese soldiers, when the Japanese kamikaze pilots and such as that, when they were not able to accomplish what they were sent to do, what did they do? They killed themselves. Why? They were disgraced that they did not do what they were supposed to do. They didn't accomplish it. And so they would kill
Do we see
themselves.
that in ISIS today then?
No, ISIS is much more selfish, much more self-oriented.
They're doing it for their own, more,
Yes.
more so towards their own
For
goal.
their family, and they don't have.
Well, and even for their, I mean, they get paid and all this kind of stuff. Where the true servant is doing it exclusively for the glory of the emperor, for the glory of the king.
But the martyrs that are being killed,
They're doing it for their
Yeah,
70.
and they have this, almost a smile they say on their
They're doing it for their 70 virgins. But anyway, so he says, and the martyr who's doing that, let me say this, that the ISIS and all that kind of stuff, they're not considering that person to be more important than me. They're considering me to be more important than that person. Why? If I kill myself, I go to heaven, I get my 70 virgins, I'm considered a hero and all.
Oh, you're
It's all-
talking about the
it's-
ISIS, actual ISIS people.
It's still all about me.
I'm talking about the Christians they're killing. the people, their heads are lopping off. Those people aren't like caving at the end, they're.
Correct. Oh no, some of the stories of the people that ISIS have beheaded and such as that are very beautiful stories. The children
Yeah.
who refuse to recant Yeshua, who refuse to recant Jesus.
And they're shocked at that, actually, I think, ISIS.
So anyway, we have to close. We're over time already. So to consider others to be more important than yourself. This is the key. Looking out not only for your interest, but also for the interest of others. If we want to, and this is what we're talking about, if you want to be changed in your life, if you want to be filled with God, with the Spirit of Yeshua, we're given exactly how to do it, what to do, what is expected, what is required of us. To empty ourselves, to humble ourselves, to consider the other to be more important than myself, and to look out for your welfare, even rather than looking out for my own. James chapter 2 finishes it off, and we'll go there today, but James chapter 2 finishes it off by saying what? You say you have faith without your works, I will show you my faith with my works. What? Say what? If this is the last food I have, I will give it to you, and I will trust God to take care of me and supply my need, rather than say, no, you go trust God. I'm the strong one. Therefore, I'm the one. I'm the Talmud. I'm the one filled with God. Therefore, what? I throw myself at the throne of grace. I will give you the last of what I have. And then I will go to God in faith and trust Him to take care of me. This is the idea that is behind that. We have to close here. This is what it means to say, in order to resemble God to some degree, it is necessary that this creature earn the perfection that its essence does not require. You see, this is contrary to what your flesh wants you to do. But this is what it is to be what? To be in the image of God is, who was in the image of God? Yeshua. Therefore what? To be in the image of God, to be in the image of Yeshua. What did He do? This is what He did. So this is how I do it. With that we say, Shabbat Shalom, Hatzorayim Tov. Good afternoon.